So today, I'm giving you guys a bit of a presentation about some of the ongoing activities and initiatives that I'm leading here as part of the LCA research program to support the development of integration of embodied carbon into different building decarbonization policies, both here in California as well as globally. So embodied carbon policy landscape, this has been rapidly changing and evolving. Historically, people used to think that this was a very future-looking aspect. Now it's the reality of the world. And we have different kinds of policies that incorporate carbon, global warming potential, and embodied carbon more specifically at various levels across the United States and globally, with incentives and regulations covering around 21 states currently, and plans, action plans, and executive orders in about 14 other states currently being developed. Here within California specifically, we have Cal Green and the Buy Clean California Act, as well as SB 596, which is the decarbonization policy for implementing net zero concrete across the state, as well as AB 2446 and AB 43. So you don't really need to remember any of those things. All you need to know is that they are addressing the embodied carbon impacts of buildings and more specifically building materials. So a bit different from a lot of the other presentations you'll be seeing today, I will be talking about two different initiatives, starting very broadly at a global initiative with the International Energy Agency, Annex 89, and then zooming in on some specific activities that I'm leading with the project from the California Air Resources Board. The IEA Annex 89 is an international research collaborative talking about aligning and advancing the application of life cycle assessment within the built environment. I am the US national lead for this initiative. And then from that, we're going to go into some of the activities that we're doing with the CARB project. So the IEA Annex is bringing together about 150 experts from 31 countries, as shown highlighted in orange on the map. Currently, I'm working with experts from about 12 countries spanning North and South America, Europe, Australia, and New Zealand for a series of publications and outputs. The importance of this activity is that it's bringing together all of our different perspectives to align global efforts towards different net zero targets and goals for the world, and helping to support other geographies in the development and implementation of life cycle assessment and embodied carbon where they don't necessarily have the resources and tools to do so in-house. We're accelerating the learning curve by doing shared experiences, so we're not replicating everything and all the hardships that have been faced in other more advanced countries. And current topics include the use cases for life cycle assessment, which I'm going to be talking about on the next few slides, as well as short-lived climate pollutants and data needs for embodied carbon assessments. And my involvement with the IEA Annex has been funded graciously through the work with ClimateWorks Foundation. So, use cases for LCA in the built environment. Life cycle assessment is a methodology largely used to quantify embodied carbon impacts and embodied carbon reduction. You can use it for a wide variety of applications, and depending on who's using it, you might have different needs for it. So as part of the IEA Annex, I am leading a report on the different use cases for LCA in the built environment, targeting specifically industry, policy, and research. So we're highlighting how LCA can be used to support policy development, how policy can then implement and integrate LCA to then inform how industry can create robust, transparent, legally binding, and reproducible results to then track progress towards climate goals. So in the built environment, when most people talk about life cycle assessment, what we're really doing is attributional LCA. So this is the current practice. This is what is used to inform environmental impact or environmental product declarations, green building certification schemes, as well as different forms of carbon accounting. It typically relies on historic data, and it is very descriptive in how it runs your assessment. Basically, what you're doing is you're taking the global emissions and you're portioning off a section of that, basically taking a slice out of the pie, and you're saying, my product or service is accountable for this kind of slice of the pie. It could be an apple pie or a cherry pie, whatever you are fancying on the day. Um, Now, it doesn't really look at what's happening with the rest of the pie. You're only caring about your pie itself. Now, you can aggregate those different environmental products or environmental product declarations together or different product level assessments together to then form your assessment of an entire building. Now, with global decarbonization efforts, supply chains are evolving, different targets and strategies are being implemented, all leading to change. Traditional attributional life cycle assessment is a very good static descriptive approach. It doesn't necessarily involve and consider how changes in systems are occurring or influencing each other. So within the built environment, there's a lot of different players involved. So we have design practices influencing how material demands are occurring and material supply chains are advancing, and then vice versa. So all these different parties are interacting with each other, as well as load shifting, load shedding, on-site renewable energy generation, and on-site storage are changing how buildings and the grid interact with each other. And then in addition to that, we have supply chains and electricity grids are all decarbonizing due to their own activities. So we have current emissions, and then all these different changes are taking place, leading to a flux of environmental impacts. So that flux can, in fact, lead to some things increasing environmental impacts, while other things are decreasing environmental impacts. And we want that change to then result in a net zero future. So through the IEA Annex work, we're developing guidelines to select the appropriate methods for which specific use cases you have. This is not telling you guys that everyone's just getting on board with EPDs and attributional LCA in the built environment, and we're going to change that. That's not what we're saying. We're providing the resources and support to help inform how you can do it properly and reproducibly. Now, the IEA Annex work is very global and big and high level. We're going to zoom in now to what kind of activities we're doing at the state to support decarbonization policy here locally. So the CAR project was introduced back in April. It's focusing on quantifying the cost and greenhouse gas reduction potential of different supply and demand side interventions for materials that contribute over 80% of A1 to A3 impacts in new buildings. So throughout this project, we're going to be developing a series of what's called marginal abatement cost curves and functionally equivalent substitution hierarchies, also known as FEASH. So the MAC curves are going to be the more policy-focused output from the research, and the FEASH are going to be the more industry-focused activity and resource to help guide people towards low-impact solutions without necessarily needing to do a full-scale assessment of every single strategy and intervention they want to implement. Breakout session today is going to be on the functional equivalence and how you can do that comparison. So please come along to that if you want to have input in the different kind of parameters that we're going to be using to define what it means for two things to be comparable to each other. Through this project, we have quite a considerable coordination effort with the construction industry and architects, engineers, material suppliers, and everyone involved in the creation of buildings, from raw material extraction to the owner and developer themselves. So take out your phone, scan the QR code. It's probably one of the only times the presenter is telling you to go get on your phone during their talk. So please do it. We are currently running a survey to gather and assess the risks and barriers to material decarbonization being faced by industry today. It is focused heavily on the Californian context. So if you're working on buildings in California, we want to hear from you. If you're working on buildings elsewhere and want to share your views, we want to hear from you. So everyone is involved and happy to participate in this survey. The target audience is architects, developers, engineers, sustainability consultants, contractors, material producers, suppliers, everyone involved in the supply chain. We're going to be running this survey throughout the rest of this year. So if you queue up the survey today, work on it tomorrow and back on BART ride home tonight, feel free to. If you want to share it around your colleagues or have someone that you meet at a conference during the fall conference cycle and you think they'd be good to get involved in it, feel free to share them around or put them in contact with me. So this survey is very cross-sectoral, getting a good representative sample of what's going on in industry. In addition to the survey, we're running a series of workshops. We ran the first workshop, I think it was last week. Some of you guys were on that with me and Will, which is awesome. I'm pretty sure it was last week, but it may have been the week before. We're going to be running the second workshop in early December this year and a series of workshops throughout next year to help support this project. So the idea with the workshop is, whereas the survey is going very broad brushed and high level to get a representative sample, the workshops are going very in depth into specific topics and discussions that we're going to be having to help inform how California policy can be shaped by industry perspectives and views. You really can't have a policy if it's not going to be implemented and drive action. So we want to hear from you guys to help inform how that can take place. So some of the future workshop topics include functional equivalence definitions. The roundtable discussion today is going to be a bit of a precursor to that, as well as the data structure for the substitution hierarchies. These are a new kind of form of design guide and resource that architects and engineers and sustainability consultants can use in their practice. So we want you guys to help inform how they take shape to make sure that they can actually be used and are valuable to you guys in the industry. We're going to be having subsequent workshops on the marginal abatement cost curves, including how they're currently used and what improvements we can make to them. And then targeted workshops on the risks and barriers identified throughout the survey and how we can overcome them to help improve industry practice overall. And then we might have a few other workshops determined based off of how the project is going. So there are some really cool, interesting takeaways from the first workshop. The idea with this workshop was just basically a giant brain dump to get everyone's perspectives and ideas thrown out the wall, and then we're going to incorporate all of them. So the EPA and IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, released a prioritization list of the materials typically used in building construction to inform the priority level of them. So certain materials from the EPA's perspective, steel, concrete, glass, and asphalt were listed as high priority materials, and then other ones like interior finishes, sheathing products were lower level. So rather than just relying on that resource, we wanted to also get feedback from you guys about what materials you think should be prioritized. So it was basically reassured that concrete and steel, two heavy hitters, followed by insulation and glass. What was really interesting was we ran the same question with which materials are the lowest priority for consideration of greenhouse gas reduction potential, and flat glass was voted one of the highest in that prioritization as well. So a bit of a double bell curve for that material, that it's either considered very high or very low and not much in the middle. Other low priority materials were interior finishes and roofing and masonry. The discussion about interior finishes was really interesting because talked about how we need to expand the system boundary to then incorporate materials and considerations for materials that are replaced at multiple points throughout the building's lifespan. So not just that upfront A1 to A3 or A1 to A5 impact, but incorporating replacement in B4 as well. So a couple other high-level topics that we're tackling in the LCA research program is building renovation and retrofit. With stop waste, we're currently assessing the different carbon payback periods of energy retrofits in 10 affordable multifamily properties across the Bay Area, and we're in talks to expand this to a more broad study. Basically, a very similar approach to what we did with the Carbon Leadership Forum for the California Carbon Report, but only focusing on retrofits, which is a pretty cool thing to do. It's not really touched much in a lot of LCA research. And then another interesting topic that we're exploring and developing is circular economy aspects of mass timber curtain wall assemblies. So here we're doing prospective LCA of emerging end-of-life scenarios to help inform how environmental impacts will actually be taking place in 20, 30, 40, 50 years, rather than using today's impacts to represent that. And then we're creating a framework to identify marginal suppliers and building material alternatives through this work as well. So that's going to be it for my talk today. Bit of high level and interesting one about the different kinds of activities we're doing with embodied carbon and policy work. And if you have any questions about this work or anything related to the entire LCA and embodied carbon research program here at CBE, please come talk to me or ask a question now. And then, yeah, come join our breakout session. Will and I are going to be talking about all the things related to the CARP project.